right, the channel is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Watching 100 Movies. I'm Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike Mateen.
Tonight, we are talking about Inglorious Bastards and Phantom Thread. I was trying to remember how exactly we decided on those. I don't think it was like a theme of any particular kind other than just like, what is some movie you feel like rewatching?
Yes, I think they're both on the list of one of those. I think they're on one of the lists, and we were like, hey, let's just pick one that we just really are excited about watching.
Sure, yeah. Well,
Because
that.
yeah, we had gone through like a point where like it started to feel too much like a chore
Mhm.
as opposed to like a fun thing that we do.
Well,
And
I
so,
think, yeah.
yeah,
So we
right.
never did go back for those four movies that we assigned ourselves at one point where it just, four is too many. So, but yeah, in any case, here we are to talk about these two. And I think both are directed by directors that at least I've had kind of in mind recently anyway. I just had the opportunity to go see Jackie Brown on the big screen with a little seminar called Jackie Brown in Context ahead of it at a local indie movie theater recently. Uh, and then, of course, Phantom Thread, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, who just won the big Oscars recently. So, yeah. So,
Oh, yeah,
um,
agreed.
chronologically, it would certainly be starting with Inglorious Bastards. See any reason to change that up?
I do not.
All right, well, then let's talk about Inglorious Bastards, directed by Quentin Tarantino in 2009, which surprised me actually looking it up. I would have, I guess, if you'd asked me to guess, I would have thought it was later than that. Um, but, it's because Tarantino's got his movies pretty spread out.
He
Uh,
does.
yeah, because I don't off the top of my head remember when Reservoir Dogs came out, but Pulp Fiction was all the way back in '94.
Yeah, Reservoir Dogs was just a couple years before that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just pulled up his list. Reservoir Dogs was 92, Jackie Brown 97, Kill Bill's Volume 1 and 2 in 2003 and 2004 respectively. 2007 was Death Proof, which of course was part of Grindhouse initially. And
Yep.
then Inglorious Bastards 2009, 2012 Django Unchained, 2015 The Hateful Eight, 2019 Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So he's definitely, slowed down somewhat in terms of his pace, but I think part of that is like that's fine. He's allowed to do that, right? But I think that I wonder if there's also some element of this sort of self-imposed he's going to make 10 movies and then retire thing that he said, and then you start saying, okay, well, does Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 count as 2, or is that 1? And um and that sort of thing. So who knows, he can do
Who
whatever he
knows?
wants. um but in any case, one of the things that I wanted to just touch on is that the seminar before Jackie Brown, I thought, took an interesting approach because it was a guy basically saying, Quentin Tarantino, complicated guy. And it is fair to have complicated feelings about him and some of the things he puts in his movies. And it's fine to also to talk about what's good and what's not. But of course, I think Inglorious Bastards is not one of his more controversial ones. So um, let's jump right into it.
Yeah, so I'm, I hope I'm not wrong. I'm pretty sure I picked this one and you picked Phantom.
Yeah, yes, correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, one of the reasons that I really like and really wanted to rewatch this movie
Mm-hmm.
is I feel like this movie kind of sits with you a little bit more than a lot of his.
Mm-hmm.
It has all the same really cool like it's built really cool, right? You know, great cinematography, great camera shots, great acting, funny dialogue, you know, witty, but
Mm-hmm.
meets the end of what you're trying to do, helps build the character, helps also, you know, advance the movie. But this is a surreal movie. Let's make sure that we're clear on that. You know, this is about let's back up. You know, this is about Nazi Germany,
Mm-hmm.
and the Inglorious Basterds are a group of Jewish soldiers who are cobbled together to go kill Nazis, basically,
Mm-hmm.
like a special forces team.
Yes.
And they build a reputation. You know, there's a counter group of, you know, there's a Nazi, what he calls himself, the Jew hunter. You know, he
Mm-hmm.
basically goes and finds people who are hiding Jewish people and figures out where all these things are. He's very,
Mm-hmm.
very smart, very articulate. Um, all that's interesting and fun. And then we culminate in this, one of the victims of the Jew hunters, of the Jew hunter, one of the younger family members who got away, now owns a cinema that is an art house cinema that, because of a pseudo love interest with a Nazi, gets on the radar of the Nazis as a place to hold Hitler's premiere, to recognize this Nazi who's the pseudo love interest and is also a sniper hero of Germany, where they have made a nationalist film that they want to celebrate. And all these things come together with the bastards of, oh, hey, we could actually kill Hitler in that theater.
Mm-hmm.
The whole movie, you're not expecting that to come true because that's not what happened.
Right. Yeah.
But yet in the movie, that does happen.
Yeah.
Hitler dies, all of these things. So it's very surreal. It's got a lot of revenge fantasy in it, which has always been for me like sort of off-putting. Like
Mm.
I don't have revenge fantasies, so like it's not, watching movies where that's a thing is not really like, doesn't
Sure. Yeah.
click with me.
Can be
So
exploitative, for sure.
yeah, so it feels exploitative and all that. So it, on first watching, I was like, I really like this movie. I understand the ending not being real. I feel, to your point, exploitative is a great word. I feel like this is like playing to like Call of Duty weekend warriors who just want to see people killed and think it's cool. And it like, when I first watched it, I like felt unsettled, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why did he do that, right? Like he took a movie that I was enjoying, and then he slowly dialed it up to where like I felt uncomfortable, and then he like turned the knob and made me feel real uncomfortable, and like I don't like this. And then I started,
Where's this discomfort coming from in this movie?
the celebration of violence against Nazis and using them as like the foil where it's like okay.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's where the first kind of dial is turned that I really remember is when the one of the soldiers who's nicknamed the Bear Jew, who
Mm-hmm.
kills Nazis with a baseball bat. There's a very intimate, it's not, is it's the right word, but it doesn't always feel like the right word,
Mm-hmm.
moment of when he has to kill a Nazi officer who isn't going to give him the information that he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And it's played as like, we should celebrate, like how cool is that he just beat this guy to death with a baseball bat
Mm-hmm.
because he was the bad guy and he wouldn't give the information. And like that doesn't, that didn't sit right with me. That's like, that's where the like the
Okay.
discomfort like starts to come. And then the whole idea of like, yes, the end result of killing Hitler is good, but we blew up all these other people.
Well, exclusively Nazi officials and their, yeah,
This is my point, right?
yeah,
Like he stacks the deck enough where it's like, you're okay with a bunch of people blowing up because they were bad people.
yeah.
And that's the part that gives me discomfort, right? Like, and
Okay.
it's, and because I don't think anybody should be blown up, right? Like that's sort of just my default, you
Well,
know. And you're going to say,
Yeah.
oh, but it's Hitler. Yeah, that's the whole point of the movie. And this is where I'm getting to
Okay, okay,
is
okay.
like he took like where it's almost becomes inarguable that
Mhm.
these guys kind of deserved it. And that's where I come to like and love this movie
Mhm.
is it makes you sit with that of like, well, is it okay?
Mhm.
I mean, that is it actually tackles one of these it's one of these existential questions that is actually out there. Like, if you had the ability to go back in time and kill Hitler, but you had to do it,
Mhm.
would you do it? Right? Like you have to kill someone, but it's Hitler. And like your instinct is like, yes, but mine is not yes, right? It's like I I I don't I don't know, and that's what
Okay.
that this movie makes you wrestle with that, or at least
Mhm.
me. It makes me wrestle with that in a way that's also told in a very fun story.
Mhm.
And so I now that I've kind of realized what I'm in for,
Mhm.
I love this movie because I love going along for that ride and continuing to ask myself those questions. Like,
Sure.
is it okay? Like you jump right to it and you say, hey, it's a room full of Nazi generals. Like that is an argument.
I mean, one of the things I was going to say about this
Killing
movie
people
is
is
like,
bad.
yeah,
Also an argument.
I was going to say, 2009, back when everybody agreed that Nazis were the bad guys.
Nazis are still the bad guys. I'm not saying that.
I know, I'm not saying that you're saying anything other than that, but it is just one of those things where it is there is a higher percentage of people out there right now willing to go to bat for that other side, or at least say things like, oh well, I don't approve of concentration camps, but they had some good ideas, that sort of people, right?
Yeah,
And so I will agree that I think that this movie definitely plays a little bit with the glorification of violence and is meant to. I do believe that like that scene that you're talking about where they beat the guy with the club, there is Tarantino is definitely doing something there where I don't think it's meant to just be hell yeah, let's cheer along with the other bastards that were as we sort of fetishize beating this guy to death. I don't think that it's meant to be as clear cut as that. However,
100%.
I
That's
think that in the context of the story where you've got a war and you've got Hitler and all of the leading Nazi officials in one movie theater, I feel like it's okay to blow that movie theater up.
right.
Yeah.
And I'm not disagreeing with your perspective.
Mhm.
What I think is interesting about this movie is it makes us have that conversation of like, you think it's okay? I don't know if I think it's okay.
Okay. What makes it not okay? This is an active World War II situation. This is not civilians in there. I
I
mean, I guess like, some of the like Nazi general's wife or something like that. But at the same time, it's not as if there are no civilians being targeted in the other direction.
it's the question I wrestle with.
Okay.
I don't know that deliberately killing people is ever okay. Like that is
Well,
that I
okay.
can have that perspective. Like that's
Yes,
the whole
you can.
point of the movie
Yeah,
is
and
that
I'm not arguing in favor of killing people in the abstract, but it's also a situation when you are fighting against the aggressor in a war that they started. uh they kind of forfeit their right to safety in that regard. It is a defensive act. But in any case, so I'm
I
not trying to make this uh
understood.
yeah.
And so that's why I feel like it's like for you it feels clear cut, for me it doesn't, and that's okay.
Mhm.
I this like where I wrestle with is like I do believe that we should not be passive about
Mm-hmm.
people and about things like that.
Yeah. It's
But
certainly true that there are circumstances in war where those same sorts of arguments get made on much more specious suggestions. Like, so for example, I would not argue that the current campaign going on in the Middle East is equivalent in any way to blowing up this movie theater in this movie.
right. And I just wrestle with this on like that kind of thing. It's like making this what feels like so clear cut.
Mm-hmm.
These people deserved it.
Mm-hmm.
We know these people deserved it. That makes it okay. Is but then where the argument of I can't remember what the logical fallacy of like extremism,
Well,
where
I
you like
mean, the
point to
movie is
the
a
extreme.
cartoon, right? Like, it's
No,
not
but I'm talking
really.
about
Yeah. Okay.
the real life argument of like taking something like this
Uh huh.
and saying, well, we're doing the same thing, and then like now we're into the nitty gritty of like, well, is it really, and that's what the cartoonish part of the movie puts into context, which I think is
I
really interesting. Yeah.
I think it's certainly true that in real life you would basically never have a situation as clear cut as the one that they create in this movie. I think that's certainly true.
Yes.
Um, but I don't think I would hesitate to say that the situation in this movie is ambiguous or that I'm ambivalent about it.
Okay, so there I will agree with you.
Okay.
The situation in the movie is meant to be where you're not ambivalent. Where I
Yes.
get called into question is what I like taking that and like putting that into more of like the real life context of like you're never going to
Okay.
have that situation,
Mm-hmm.
but using that argument of like, well, this is that situation when it's not, and the complexity that's around that, like
Who's
that's where
doing
it's
that
like
though? I
anybody who's justifying war violence is
Oh,
it's not
yeah,
using
okay.
this exact argument. It's not like they're going
Yeah.
and saying like these people are exactly this thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? But my point is like when we justify war violence,
Right.
the people on the side of it typically take the stance that these are undeniably evil bad people,
Hmm. Hmm.
and therefore like using not I'm not trying to like I'm using the argument you said not because I'm trying to like twist your argument on you
Okay.
by any means, but the argument of this is unequivocally an okay thing to do. Like that sometimes feels like the argument for any
Mm-hmm.
type of war violence. And what this movie does is by making that truly unequivocally inarguable,
Mm-hmm.
it calls into question like, well, where down the line does that not be okay? And I think that's
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I guess I never really approached the film in that way because it's so clearly like an exploitation sort of power fantasy, revenge fantasy
Mm-hmm.
story, right? Like that's just the context that it's operating in. I don't really think there was ever really any intention for this movie to say, um, and that's why we should apply these lessons to real life. I think it was really literally just like, wouldn't it have been cool if during World War II we could have ended it early by putting all of the Nazi high command into one room and blowing it up? I feel like that's kind of what the movie's intended level is.
Yeah, I don't know what the movie's intended level was. I'm just saying my approach to the movie and
Okay.
why I enjoy kind of thinking through that and sitting with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like so the movie maybe
Yeah.
hit me a little deeper than it meant to. I apologize.
Yeah, I guess I see where you're coming from. It's certainly true that arguments in favor of killing any particular group of people in war are frequently used to justify pretty horrendous actions in situations that are never as clear cut as in this movie. And I think that that is broadly true. And I guess where maybe I'm only hesitant there is because in this movie we are talking about Nazis, and I don't think that the Nazis are ambiguous in their evil.
100%.
Yeah.
Like I think we're in agreement on the terms. I think it's just where we sit with it that's a little bit different, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's okay, right? Like I I enjoy the fact that it makes this unambiguous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not meant to be argued that like Nazis are bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not arguing that Nazis aren't bad and that Nazis, if we could have ended that, that it would have been better.
Mm-hmm.
It's it just calls into question like that methodology when it's not Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't know if the movie was intending that, but it's super compelling for me to watch it
Mm-hmm.
because what the movie's basically asking is if evil is monstrous, definitive, does revenge become righteous?
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, I feel like this movie's answer is yes.
yes,
Yeah.
but
That
then
doesn't.
I leave
Yeah.
and say, like, how do I feel about that?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like
Yeah.
confronting monstrosity with monstrosity, right? Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
like, which that's why I think that the film, the earlier scene in the film with the beating of the guy to death intimately is important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's like, okay, this guy's clearly bad and evil and does horrible things.
Mm-hmm.
So it justifies
So
us to do a horrible thing to him. Like I'm
where I
not
think
saying
the
it's right or
movie's
wrong. Yeah.
here's where I think the movie is doing something that's a layer. I don't want to say you missed it, but this is I in some ways I think a little bit of a counter argument. I think what this movie is trying to show is that just because you can have a German soldier act really dignified and calm and brave in the face of his impending death does not mean that he is not a monster who has done horrendously evil things. It means that he can hide as someone who has not done these horrendously evil things. This is why the bastards are so fixated on the idea that if they leave someone alive, they don't like the idea that that person will survive the war and then take off their uniform and pretend that they were just a normal person who didn't do these monstrous things.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want the monsters in the Nazi uniforms to be able to later pretend that they didn't do those things. And so I think that that scene is wrestling with it a little bit because we are seeing this soldier presented as like dignified, brave, all of these sorts of things. But he is also an officer in the Nazi army during World War II, right? This is not an innocent guy, right? This is not someone who was forcefully conscripted against his will, right? Like, this is someone who believes in the cause. And I think that the movie is interested to some extent in exploring that because it is this element where you have someone who is a Nazi who can essentially present as a normal, rational person that you would hesitate to inflict that violence on. Because that sort of a violent action is not generally the sort of response that we have towards our fellow human being. I hopefully we would very 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 rarely ever find ourselves in that position, and if we do, typically we would hope that it's only in a self-defense type of situation. But I think in this context, though, this is why we have the big payoff at the end with the Christoph Waltz character, this Jew hunter, right? Because he makes this deal that allows their whole plan to follow through. Although it's unclear in my mind how much of the success of the plan is down to what the bastards were doing and therefore Landa allowing that to go forward, and how much was already that Shoshana was going to lock them in and burn the building down. Now, obviously, both things happen, but it's not clear that her plan wouldn't have worked all by itself, even if the bastards weren't ever there. Right? Yep. Like, and Landa didn't know anything about that, right? He probably just would have been in there getting burned too, if not for the rest of this happening. Unclear. It's like, because it all happens,
thoughts
right?
on all that too.
Yeah. But the point just being, certainly he is opportunistic. He sees the war maybe starting to not go in the direction of the Nazis winning, and he's saying, okay, well, maybe I have an opportunity to switch sides here and get myself set up really nice by helping the Americans to kill Hitler, and he makes this whole deal, right? But what it comes down to, though, is we have Brad Pitt's character and the other bastards who are saying, so you're going to help make us make a deal to end the war tonight. I'll make that deal. But I don't like the idea that you're going to just move to the U.S. and take off your uniform and pretend you were just some normal guy. Mm-hmm. Maybe this deal earns you your life, but it does not earn you the right to pretend that you didn't do all of those other horrible things. And I think that that's what the movie ends on, right? So I feel like that's kind of the thesis statement in the movie, so to speak, right? It's not just, well, we all agree Nazis are bad. It's also saying how people who do these horrible Nazi things will sometimes later try to pretend that they didn't. And part of the movie's fantasy here is not merely that you could kill the ones that are the most egregious, but also that you would have a way to spot the ones who try to pretend later. And so I think that there's an element there going in. And so I think that the lesson of the scene early on, where I do think Tarantino is deliberately trying to make us feel a little bit uncomfortable about the violence, but I don't think that, at least my read on it, is that the goal of that discomfort is for us to have that recognition of saying, so it's because it's the uncomfort for the officer getting beat to death, but then there's the younger soldier who's left alive to send the message but is given the scar, right? And I think that's what he's going for in that scene, because it's this idea of saying, you don't get to be in the Nazi army and then later pretend like you didn't do anything wrong. So yes. That's kind of my take. I mean, I'm not, again, necessarily trying to say that you're arguing against that exactly. That's I'm not
arguing against anything. Yeah. I'm merely presenting like my takeaway from it. Yeah. I'm not arguing any of it.
Okay.
I get all those layers. Yeah. The complexity for me in the first scene that we're discussing, mm-hmm. and I agree with you. I'm not arguing what Tarantino's presenting, because, like you said, the thesis statement at the end is like, no, you don't get away with this. I think that the Hans Landa character is a incredible addition to this. And I don't just think because of his witty dialogue and all that kind of stuff, like all the stuff that, I think what he shows is that intelligence, like devoid of morals,
Mm-hmm.
is damning, basically, right? Like that's what happens is that
Mm-hmm.
he's super smart, and that's what we learn with all his witty dialogue. That's what
Yeah.
Tarantino is showing us. That's what all this, and that's why he realizes things are going the other direction,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's very smart,
Yeah. He doesn't
but he's
change sides because
aligning,
he has a change of heart.
right? He's aligning himself with where the power lies.
Yeah.
And he ultimately pays the price for that. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
that I think is an incredible thesis statement, you know,
Mm-hmm.
is you don't get to just that's not okay. Like if you are just serving your own self-interest,
Mm-hmm.
intelligence is not an excuse, right? Like I feel like this was almost a damnation on it. Like intelligent people who feel like, well, because I'm smart and I know which way the wind is blowing and I'm going to go do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no,
Yeah.
there's a repercussion at the end for that. Even if he did intelligently work his way into keeping his life,
Mm-hmm.
there was a repercussion for him chasing power and being okay with evil
Mm-hmm.
because it served him. Like
Right.
that character is very powerful.
Well, and not even merely okay with it, but certainly actively perpetrating it himself on many different occasions.
Yes, because it
Yeah.
self-served
Mm-hmm.
his intelligence. Like it made him feel good to be so smart that he could like figure out where the Jews were hunting and
Right.
or where the
Yeah.
Jews were hiding, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that made him feel good. He liked doing it, and
Yeah.
then but there was evil perpetrated because of it. He may have never have been the guy that pulled the trigger, and that's never really addressed in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But you can feel it,
I
right? Like
mean, he's. I feel like to the extent that he doesn't pull the trigger is almost moot because he's the guy that orders the men with rifles and machine guns to come in and he points at the floor where they should shoot. Right? So it's
yeah, but
like
but you could see a scene in this movie. I would argue that
mm-hmm.
where he says that, like hey, like we know that, right? Like,
Yeah.
but who he's talking to, the bastards, when he's coming to them,
Mm-hmm.
they don't necessarily know how that all went down, right? But
Right. Yeah.
he could legitimately say, I have never personally killed anyone,
Yeah.
and he would be wrong to both. I mean, both we both have the
Right.
same take on that, right? Like he
Mm-hmm.
pointed out where to kill people,
Yeah.
but did he ever touch the trigger? No. So he has this like weird like my
Well,
hands are
it's
washed of this,
there's a
right?
line from a "They Might Be Giants" song that probably does. I don't know if the phrase originates from that song, but it's called "Can't Shake the Devil's Hand and Then Say You're Only Kidding."
Right.
And so it's basically this idea that he thinks, well, sure, I was on that side when it served me, but also now I should be able to just switch sides. And aren't I smart for figuring out that I should do that? And it really never even occurring to him that he wouldn't be able to get away with that. That someone would be able to just well because he's got this clever plan where he figures there's no way that anything will happen to me because if the bastards were to do anything to me, they would get in trouble. They would be punished, and like they would be and so they won't. And so, but then of course, we have just Brad Pitt just saying he's like, I'll get chewed out. I've been chewed out before, and it's just like, and so what he fails to take into account is a person who is not motivated by the same things that he is, who cares about a principle more than their own personal self-interest. That's what ultimately defeats him is or at least makes him receive a pyrrhic victory rather than the overall success he's looking for, because he just didn't even occur to him that someone would be willing to put themselves in trouble in order to just stop him. from getting everything. But even still, it's like a mixed success, I suppose. Um, but in any event, though, yeah, I think it's. Hmm?
I still had
Oh
I
yeah.
still wanted to go back to
Oh yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
the second uh soldier in the earlier scene,
Mm-hmm.
because that one I feel does something a little different.
Mm-hmm.
100% agree with you on the layer of like, oh, I can disguise myself in this, I'm an officer, I have dignity, all that type of stuff. What not specifically addressed in the film, but is a reality, is
Mm-hmm.
that once you get down below that layer, they were not necessarily, I guess everyone has a choice, right? But like
Mm-hmm.
the choice was harder for that type of Nazi as to whether or not they joined the party. And that's,
Yeah.
oh, this is it's
I
a
know,
very
I know.
real thing.
I'm just saying that if you're fighting in a war and the other person is wearing a uniform and carrying a gun, I don't think that you take the time to uh, sit them down. And now, I'm not saying that we look. I'm not
You're arguing on the
advocating the
providence
bastards.
of what's happening in the movie. I'm
Well, no,
saying again,
I'm actually trying to get to another point of just
okay.
saying that there is still a degree to which we can recognize that there is some nuance, but there are also people who find ways around that nuance because they actually stand for something, as opposed to the people who say, "Well, I will get in trouble if I don't."
I and I haven't finished
Okay,
my
sorry. I'm
point, so
sorry.
I'm not arguing
Yeah,
against
okay.
that.
All right.
I am saying it is a little bit more nuanced,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's why I feel like the scene is very powerful, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm because I do understand the layers at the same level that you are. I'm just talking about my response to
Sure,
them,
sure.
right? Like yes, the guy who refuses to give everybody up, but like is standing there with dignity, but yet gets cruelly beaten.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a discomfort there, right? But then they bring another guy up, and he quickly, I mean, it is clear that he is not, well, I guess it's not clear. Where the argument of clarity becomes is it clear that he's on the side of the Nazis, he's just scared of getting beat to death, or
Mm-hmm.
is it clear that he's actually not really on the side of the Nazis, he just got himself roped into this?
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that that was okay,
Right.
but it changes the delineation of like this is the right thing to do to
Mm-hmm.
this guy.
Well, see, where I think I come down, at least as in this movie, because again, if we're taking a step and talking about real life, there's a lot of positions that I would feel differently about than I do about scenes in this movie, because the scenes in this movie are deliberately constructed to lack that nuance. But I think that the distinction is he helps them and gets to live, but scarred. It's a parallel to Landa at the end, which is to say, you helped us, so you get to live, but you don't get to pretend like you didn't do the other part. And so I think that that's the distinction there. They don't kill him, they just scar him.
Agreed. Where I think what makes it more complex for me walking away from it is that that young man and Landa
Mm-hmm.
leave with the same result.
Mm-hmm.
But did they actually really inflict the same amount of deliberate evil on people? I'm not saying, and I think this is what I want to keep going back to. I think what you keep saying is 100% right. Like the movie is like making a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
It this very distinct, unambiguous line the movie draws
Mm-hmm.
that I 100% see and agree with puts me in a point where like I start to walk it back and say like, well, if I think that's okay, like, do I think that's okay? 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 Like, at what point is it not okay? And
Mm-hmm.
and and the movie isn't answering that. The movie's not trying to do that. The movie, I like this movie because I like sitting in that space.
Yeah, yeah. I see where you're coming from too. Because I do certainly agree that, like like I said, some of the things that I'm saying I support in this movie are things where I there's probably very very few real world situations where I would take that same position. But that's because, generally speaking, the real world does include the nuance that this movie deliberately lacks. And so I think that the
And that's
uh,
what I love about the movie.
yeah,
Like it ripped all the nuance out of
yes,
it to force you to confront this and or force me to confront this. Not
mm.
everybody like you. I love that you can just enjoy this like and I'm not saying it like it's there's something
Mm,
wrong with you, right? Like at face value, like this is what the movie's saying is like, hey,
mhm.
wouldn't this be cool, right? And
I,
I'm saying like that I, I'm pulling it in a different place.
I
And
think maybe part of where I'm coming from in terms of having any application to real life is frustration and anger with the people who enable evil things to happen and then have a little tear go down their cheek of like, oh, I didn't know, when they had every opportunity to know if they would only open their eyes about it, right? And in this
yeah.
context too, we talk about this young man. Maybe he was someone who really had no other choice and was conscripted against his will and hated every minute about it. But probably he's someone he wanted to save his own life because he was scared in that moment and because he just saw what happened to his officer. He doesn't want that to happen to him. And what happens when they let him go with the scar is that he immediately reports back to his command and he is in his uniform. We remember
So
in Saving Private Ryan, there's the soldier where they let him go because he pleads for his life, and then later he kills one of them.
yes. So what I take from that is what I and I'm making an extrapolation, obviously, from
Mm-hmm.
the from the film, is that this particular guy is so weak that he probably never believed in what the Nazis were doing.
Mm-hmm.
But the same reason he so quickly, when he got scared, pointed out the positions. The
Mm-hmm.
same reason he so quickly, when he got released and was scared that something was going to happen to him because he clearly had been marked by them.
Yeah.
So everybody knew he had done something because he lived and was and had talked to them. He
Mm-hmm.
ran straight to the top and was like, here's what I told him. Is the same reason I extrapolate back to why he became a Nazi in the first place. He was
I'm
scared.
I'm just saying I think that scared guy can pull a trigger just like anybody else.
He can, but he got put into a position where he was scared and had to do things that he wouldn't have wanted to do. That doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it complicates how easy it is to say, well, you put on this uniform. If
Mm-hmm.
he put on that uniform because he was scared and you're going to do things to him because you've scared him, does
Mm-hmm.
that make you better? And you're going to say in the context of the movie, they were all Nazis. Like
Yeah.
it's 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 a
I I
it's
just
a
sort
it's
of
a
feel like
reference point that I think through.
I
If
think that
if someone
in
had to do
yeah.
something because they were scared and then you scared them to do something
Mm-hmm. I
in just
think
that narrow context, are you better?
I think in morality, there are two ways to approach it. There's intent and then there's result, right? Now, obviously, sometimes you can have good intentions and inadvertently produce a bad result. You don't always have full control over that, right? But if the result that your intention, like if your weak intentions are proving, producing demonstrably evil results, I think you are responsible for that if you keep doing it.
Totally fine take. That like, but my point is like it allows us to think through that take.
Hmm.
Like I can I can think, and I'm not saying like I came to the conclusion that like you are
Hmm.
like righteous and
Yeah. I think it's certainly true that there are an awful lot of people who it's very easy to say that you would take some principled stand in a hypothetical situation, but if it really kind of came down to it, a lot of people would take the self interested position. I think that's true for most people in a lot of circumstances. But I think that we are still all ultimately responsible for our own actions. And so it's a situation where I think that yeah, I think what it just comes down to is that like I'm just viewing this movie as a deliberate attempt for entertainment purposes to say, let's contrive a situation where we don't have to worry about that stuff. Um, now, I guess it's not to say that it prevents someone from also being entertained by having it apply. I guess I'm just sort of feeling like I don't feel bad about being glad that the Nazis in the movie get killed. I feel like that if we have, as a society, as a civilization, any more clear cut example of an evil ideology, I think it's hard to look, at Nazis and not say that that's pretty on the mark, right? I mean, it's like that's kind of where I come down on it, and so and I think it's just one of those where he didn't choose a complicated situation. He was reacting to a lot of the kinds of movies that he likes, which is war movies where you get to go see some guys do. It's like the Wild Bunch, right? It's like the Magnificent Seven. It's where you want to go. Now it obviously adds some like there's a lot of moving pieces and all, but I don't know. I mean I just felt like the movie wanted me to be happy that all the Nazis were getting killed. But I
and
guess I do recognize that the other piece of that is indulging a sort of bloodlust in that way is one thing in a movie where you have contrived that perfect situation, and it's another thing entirely in the real world where it's very rarely so black and white.
I think
Because
we have landed on consensus. Like,
okay.
yes, I do not argue your point of view. I do not think that there's something wrong with you watching the movie that way.
Hmm.
I love this movie because I reflect on it differently. And
Hmm.
that doesn't make me better, worse, different. I mean, it's just it it challenges me because I see all of the things that you're saying of like
Hmm.
this is 100% unequivocally the right thing to have happened. But
Yeah.
it challenges me to think about what situations do we believe outside of that where
Hmm.
these things are okay and it
I
and
I
and
think
where
that
is that line
I think the
that's
other
interesting to me. That's interesting to me. Yeah.
the other piece though that I would push on for that though are we ought to, as people, be aware of the circumstances in our own lives where perhaps we should consider, are we the person who are enabling some evil thing to happen by not acting or by
Mhm.
going along to get along, right? Because I think that there are times where um, uh, it's just one of those things where it's like people make decisions all the time to just say, well, I think that the company that I'm working for, and I'm this is not a personal example. I don't feel this way about my own company, but if someone says, "Well, I don't like the way that my company that I work for acts in the world. I think they're harmful, but they pay me a lot of money," right? People make those sorts of decisions all the time. But I think that there is a suggestion here of, if you're gonna be someone, maybe be someone who is trying to stamp out evil instead of someone who's enabling it, right? You don't want to be the person
100%.
who is like, well, sure, I'm wearing the uniform, but only because I would have gotten in trouble if I didn't, right? And obviously, in real life, it's obviously more complicated. There are a lot of people who like, what other options did he have? Well, I mean, the answer is probably not none, right? He could have tried to leave. He could have done any number of different things that didn't have to be, I walk around with the gun and I shoot the people they tell me to shoot.
Yes. And I love that what you just said there, because like you just landed on like what my
Mm-hmm.
final notes are on this movie is exactly that. Like I know I feel like I spent a lot of times talking about the part of like how the bastards play, fighting the Nazis, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the other piece to this layer, is
Mm-hmm.
that sorry. Um that's the is exactly what you just said. Like this is all to me about like, because we're table stakes, Nazis are evil,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. So we're talking about confronting evil. And how do you do that? Do you do that by taking a stand when evil comes to you and invites you in,
Mm-hmm.
which is what this piece you're talking about? Do you take a stand in outside of your own best interests?
Mm-hmm.
I I would like to think that I do, but like it's a question.
Mm-hmm.
And then back to what I was arguing before. If evil comes to you and you have a chance to be monstrous to confront it, does that shape you
Mm-hmm.
into evil? Like, I don't know and that's what I'm saying. I don't know that what they're doing is wrong, because in the
Mm-hmm.
context of the movie, it clearly isn't. But it's like,
I
where
think,
on the scales of evil and
yeah.
good and right and righteousness and wrong, like, I feel like there's more complexity that weighs into this than I
Mm-hmm.
ever really thought when I first watched it. I just saw it was like, that's surreal, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
I think I kind of liked it. I'm not really sure. And I never really knew why. I was never really sure until I watched it a few more times, and why I wanted to watch it again to clarify my thoughts is like, I don't I'm not making a definitive argument. I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying this movie presents lots of ways to confront evil, and
Yeah.
that it's hard. It's hard if you're the guy who needs to step in and just put on the uniform. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can see how easy that is. But is he also wrong and then thus deserving
Mm-hmm.
of the scar? Is he wrong but not deserving of the scar? Right? Like, these are the questions I wrestle with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Was he right because it protects his family, which is his priority? But then he killed somebody, which is wrong. I like it's and we don't know his story, right? And we're
Mm-hmm.
not meant to. And it's none of this movie is meant to teach us that. It just puts me in a place where I kind of sit with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that, especially with a movie that's super entertaining, super cartoonish,
Yeah.
has a lot of fun moments, a lot of tense moments. I mean, take let's let's just close this out and let's
Sure.
take all of this context out of it,
Yeah.
and let's talk about the scene in the basement.
Uh-huh.
What a great scene,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Certainly. Yeah. Like, I mean, this, like, Tarantino likes to write people talking, and like he likes dialogue and to have these long talky scenes. It's fascinating, I think, in some respects. Like, the movie is titled Inglorious Basterds, and
He
in
also
many
loves
respects
Mexican
it is about
standoffs,
them.
which
Well,
this isn't exactly a
what
Mexican standoff, but
I
it's
mean,
close.
sure, but what I was actually also going to
Sorry.
say is the Bastards themselves as a group are in like 20% of the movie.
Yeah. They don't talk that much either.
No, because
Outside of Aldo. Yeah.
like we have our whole introductory sequence with Landa, right? That whole sequence. We have a short sequence where we learn kind of the history of the Bastards. We have a long sequence in the basement where, in theory, this is their plan, but only like two of their group are even in the room, and they basically don't talk in this long talky scene. And then they are peripherally involved in the last two acts, right? So
Right.
it's kind of fascinating that there's so many moving pieces, because we have the whole Shoshana arc, and then them just kind of getting involved. But yes, so just that scene is great, because just the tension of rising and falling, of like, you got to try to maintain the cover, but it's a little bit awkward. Can you fool this guy? Are you successfully fooling him? And then, of course, having it get given away by just a simple little hand gesture. You know, although, yeah, whenever they do that thing, maybe it's, again, just because it's what we're used to in the States, but I feel like this feels awkward in my hand. Like, that feels harder to do with my hand than this. Like, just like even just the tendons of it feel different. Like, it feels like this, like, it's one thing like this, but like, this is an awkward position to have my fingers in. But yeah, so it's just such an interesting little, little throwaway thing. But again, that's kind of often how a lot of Tarantino's, when there's violence, it is not an overlong, extended action sequence, usually. Obviously, he did make Kill Bill, and he has made extended action sequences. But like in this one, you have a long, very tense scene with a lot of suspense. And then when the violence happens, it happens fast. And then there's more talking.
Yeah. It's a phenomenal scene.
Mm-hmm.
That is independent of any of the other things that we were discussing about the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and but it fits within the movie, because so much about the movie is about like plans that don't necessarily go to plan.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, that's a whole other subset,
yeah,
of what's happening. And I love that this is like the key point. The other piece is what you talked about earlier, which is like, I mean, the Bastards plan, if it worked, it worked. If it didn't,
mm-hmm.
Shoshana's plan might have worked. Like, it was sort of this providence that it was
It's
all
kind of,
going to come together.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a weird coincidence that it is Shoshana, that she has this connection with Landa, but he doesn't end up recognizing her, and technically is never even aware of her part of the plan. And she, as far as I can tell, is never at any point aware of the Bastards or their plan.
No.
They're entirely distinct, separate.
Yes.
She does not even learn that their part of the plan is happening, because she's been shot by then.
Right. Which is, like, again, part of the whole, what that earlier basement scene is leading us to understand, is that,
Mm-hmm.
like, there's like I said, there's a providence to this,
Mm-hmm.
that is outside of the planning.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's also a great scene. So
Mm-hmm. And like, certainly it's possible that Shoshana's plan by itself would have worked, but also it's kind of like what Landa says, is like, he puts the bomb under Hitler's chair, right? Like, this is like, we're gonna make sure you get the big targets is kind of his thing, right? But then of course, also even before that bomb goes off, we have the bastards breaking in with their machine guns, right? So it's like there's a lot of it's basically everything's triple stamped by the end.
Yes.
Well, certainly, I feel like we ended up talking a lot more about like themes and the philosophy of it more than the specific details. But we could go into more details, but we also did have another movie we're going to talk about. We're an hour in.
Yes. Why don't you get started on that? I'm going to run to
Okay.
the restroom, check why my dogs are barking, make sure my sick baby's okay.
All right.
I will be right back.
Okay. So a little bit of table setting to for our switch to Phantom Thread is I'm a big fan of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies. I believe that the first one I saw of his was actually Magnolia, and then later went back for, um, oh gosh, it's the movie where they're Boogie Nights, and I have since seen all of his movies, and he's one of my favorite filmmakers. Obviously, he's been in the headlines more recently because his latest movie, One Battle After Another, won Best Picture, among other things, and is another great movie, I think, which is about the complexities of figuring out what it means to try to stand against evil or oppression and how different tactics might have different sorts of results. But what do you do and how do you approach all of that? Great movie for those sorts of conversations. But Phantom Thread is one of his movies where I feel like it was sort of less hailed at the time, but a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson fans that I know consider it one of, if not their single favorite, at least among their favorite. And I kind of felt the same way, even though I saw it only once in the theater and then had not rewatched it at all until we rewatched it for this. And it was just because I sort of felt like I still had it all fresh in my head, even though this movie came out in 2017. I hadn't felt the need to rewatch it because I felt like I still remembered it all. I didn't. It wasn't like I felt like I didn't need to rewatch it. It wasn't because I didn't want to. I just felt like it was all still there, and so that was kind of a novel experience. But of course, it did make me wonder how much of that sense was accurate. So, Mike, had you seen Phantom Thread before, or was this the first time for you?
I hadn't actually seen it. I
Okay.
never got to see it during that Oscar run. So this was my first time.
Okay. Well, what did you think?
I I think it was interesting. I also like Paul Thomas Anderson. I don't necessarily put this in like my top echelon of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nothing wrong with it. Just the sorry that I'm like on a super thematic mode
That's no,
as
that's
opposed
totally
to
fine.
like an
Yeah.
executional mode.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
But like the whole control, power, like thing, it to go echo back to what we were talking about, like it didn't sit with me the same way,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
The one thing I did like, because it's something that I truly believe in,
Mm-hmm.
is that I feel like this movie leaves us with a theme that love is a choice, not a feeling.
Hmm. Say more about that.
At the end, they need to choose each other. They
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily like it's it's not this like there's this struggle and dynamic like through the whole movie,
Mm-hmm.
but when it comes down to the end, like something both of them have to decide that this is what they want to be a part of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I feel like is indicative of true love, right? Like you don't it's more about like okay, it's never perfect,
Mm-hmm.
But if you both choose it, then that's powerful.
Yeah, I think that that is a good take on it. One of the things that made this movie stand so strongly in my memory, I think, is that I'll give a like little brief synopsis for people who haven't seen it in a moment, but most of the movie, it's easy to not be entirely sure where it's going, because what you have are two complicated people being complicated at each other and basically having a lot of trouble sort of trying to figure out what their whole deal is. Like,
Yes.
what's their individual deal? What's their deal together as a couple? What's the relationship to all of the other people in the room? And all of that is people having difficulty figuring all that stuff out.
Mhm.
But then what happens at the end is that they figure it out. And then they're just like, oh, okay, now we know what this is.
Right.
And we can do it.
But by
And
choice,
yes,
not by just feeling,
right,
right?
but it took that epiphany though of recognition, of realizing what it was that they wanted and that they could share in that. So just for anyone who hasn't seen it, because I feel like this one is probably less seen broadly than Inglorious Bastards is, but it's about Reynolds Woodcock, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, who is in the 1950s. He is a high fashion designer of women's dresses, and he is a very particular sort of guy. Without getting into specific diagnoses, he is most likely on the autistic spectrum in some way. He's got a lot of sort of he likes things the way he likes them very specifically. He hyper focuses for
Routine.
a while.
Routine.
Yeah,
He has a routine. We'll go with
right.
that.
But and it also just so happens that part of his routine, that in the way he's lived his life for quite some time, is that he will meet some young woman and find her incredibly inspiring and use her as the muse for his work, and have her move in to the house and live with him and sleep with him um, for a while, until he starts kind of getting tired of her, and then he'll start getting cold and ignore her and unresponsive. And eventually his sister, who also helps run the business with him, will encourage the young woman to recognize that her time has passed and that she should move along. And this has been clearly something that he has gone through this process multiple times. And sometimes the women just leave, and sometimes they just become, now they just work in the dress shop like all of the other people who work in the dress shop. Because there's dozens of seamstresses and stuff. But what happens is, as we watch the end of his latest cycle of that, he is feeling down because he's got a little bit of maybe manic depressive in him too. And he is feeling uninspired. And so his sister suggests that he go out to the country, and he does, where he meets Alma working as a waitress. And they have a very sort of fun, flirty bit where he orders a ridiculous breakfast and then is delighted by the fact that she remembers his whole complicated order. And can just like repeat it back to him, and she's kind of given him energy back. He's trying to give like he's ordering a pain in the ass breakfast, which is like it's got 15 things in it, and they're all in the way that he wants them to be, and he's just sort of being like a very demanding order, and she's like amused by it. And so she's kind of giving him flirty energy back as a result. And so now we've started a new cycle where he's inspired by her, right? And so she moves to the city with him. He's her newest muse. She's his model, and they're loving this whole thing. But then when it gets to the point where the cycle starts to go through again, and he's starting to treat her like he did all of these other women, she's not content to just be sad about it and then leave. she's like, no, I'm gonna kind of fight for this, but I don't know what it is that I need to do, and I need to try to figure it out because I feel like there is something there that's worth figuring out. But he is so out of touch with his own emotions. There's no way you could just ask him any of these things. So how do you get there from here? And much of the back half of the movie is you've got Reynolds and you've got Alma, and then you've also got Cyril, the sister, played by Leslie Manville, who's also good in it because she obviously cares about the business, she cares about her brother, but she also recognizes and doesn't necessarily appreciate how he sometimes treats young women, but also it's like, what are you going to do sort of thing. But then I think when she sees Alma trying to kind of trying to fight for the relationship, she seems to have kind of a complex emotional response of maybe a little bit of jealousy, like you think you can change this setup that we've got, but also a little bit of, hey, good for her. She's got more backbone than the previous woman did. But then, of course, what like the thing that we've maybe been dancing around a little bit, we're going to go ahead and spoil this, is that she poisons him with mushrooms, not enough that he dies, but enough that he gets really sick and throws up a bunch for a couple of days. But the thing is, once he is sick enough that there's really no choice, he cannot continue to work. He has to go to bed and be sick in bed for a while. She is right there to tend to him, and they find themselves in suddenly a completely different dynamic, where instead of him being the one who's always in charge and dictating how everything goes, suddenly he has no ability to dictate anything, and she is completely in control. And they kind of find that they like that. And it's not that he wants to be sick exactly, but it's sort of a recognition of he cannot make himself take a break. But if someone else can make him take a break, he enjoys the break. He just can't initiate it, right? He needs someone to make it happen so that he can finally relax, because if he tries to just relax himself, his own brain will try to tell him that he's lazy or not working hard enough or whatever rat's nest is going on inside that guy's brain. But if it's forced on him, then he kind of likes it. And so there's this initial sequence where she makes him really sick, and then they have this sort of bonding reaction as she's nursing him back to health, and he has some like weird dreams about it, and there's a lot of just discussion of everyone else of like, oh, what do we do? He's never sick. This is unusual. This is unprecedented. But eventually what happens by the end is she did this kind of out of desperation, and I don't think she fully anticipated how successful in many respects the whole episode was. But by the end, what has happened is that he realizes what she did and kind of likes it. Not that he wants to be sick all the time, but he kind of wants there to be this sort of alternating dynamic where he gets to be controlled, and he gets to be in control for a while, and then she gets to be in control for a while. And so they've essentially come up with a very complicated two-person kink. I mean, that's one way to look at it. It's a relationship dynamic for sure.
Unconventional.
Yes.
Is a nicer way to say
and
it.
Also, yeah. I think, this is one of those things where if we were to step outside of the fiction of the movie and into real life, please don't poison your loved ones, everyone. You may think you've got just the right amount of mushroom to give them to make them just have a tummy ache for a couple of days. Don't do that, really. That's a bad idea. But in the movie, she's she's got these mushrooms down. She knows how much to give him and how much he should eat, and how long they can kiss before he's going to need to go throw up. But I thought when I watched it that because I spent so much of the movie just in this state of I am compelled and fascinated by these people, but feeling very sort of unsettled in the like, I don't know where this is going. I don't know how these two people can they figure it out? Should they figure it out? What are they actually even trying to do? And all of that. And then for them to reach this sort of, it's almost like a chemical reaction where there's a lot of sound and fury, but then you reach a new equilibrium. And the relief and catharsis that this movie made me feel when they figure it out, and we get this sense that like, oh, oh, okay, it's like this. It feels like this big sort of kind of a fun relief, and I feel like I'm really happy for them, even though these are very two complicated people where there's an element to which you say I am very glad that they found each other so that they mutually take each other off the market for everybody else. Like I love
Agreed
them
with
as
that.
characters, but boy, you know, you pity anyone else they ever try to have a relationship with, either of them.
Agreed.
Hmm.
And I think, yeah, their unconventional relationship is not a map to
Mm-hmm.
how you should have a relationship.
Yeah.
Like I said, what I left with on the positive side of it is that ultimately, because they both recognized who each other was
Mm-hmm.
and what each other wanted, they made a distinct choice that they were right for each other. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that part is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get there without all of the other weird dynamics and all that kind of stuff. And
She found his phantom thread. Which
right.
the title again for anyone who didn't see it, the title comes from he tells her early on about how when he makes clothes, he finds it interesting to put little secrets in the lining of stuff where no one would ever see it or even have any idea that it's there except for him that put it there. But he puts little secret messages in there. Sometimes they're just little labels that have words on them. He talks about how in like his vest he has a picture of his mom in the lining, and those little things. And so I think, you know, where that kind of ultimately becomes reflective of the whole theme is this idea that he presents himself as someone who always wants to be in control, always has to be in control, very demanding, but he did have this secret need inside there where nobody else could ever see it to be controlled sometimes. And she saw it and figured it out. So now they can be together. It's great.
Yes.
um I will say, like, I'm generally speaking, not someone who cares a lot about clothes. So, like, fashion stuff usually doesn't move the needle very much for me. But certainly, there's a lot of beautiful clothes in this movie, and just a lot of really great photography and cinematography. You know, Paul Thomas Anderson's movies generally look pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those things hit. I said I don't feel like I have that much more to say on this movie, and I
Sure.
feel
Yeah.
bad. Like it's
No, no,
not
that's okay.
if there's anything wrong with the movie. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's for me like fairly straightforward. It's a well acted movie. It's a well
Mm-hmm.
directed movie. It's a well shot movie. It's an odd but interesting premise that I leave with a hopeful element.
Mm-hmm. It makes me
That's
think actually
good.
a little bit about One Battle After Another, and in the way that we talked about it, where like there's so much that happens in that movie But by the time it comes around to the end again, it's small and it's just about Bob and his daughter, right? And it's kind of like it just makes me think about that in sort of like the emotional shape of the movie.
Yep. Like I mean, yeah. If I had if I had to walk away with one positive take of this movie outside of like its construction and all that,
Mm-hmm.
it's love is a choice. It's not always clean. It's not always exactly what you thought. It's not always exactly what every individual wants,
Mm-hmm.
but like, because it's kind of a weird way that they got to this, but love was a choice.
Yeah. All right. So I think we can probably leave it here. But let's just talk a little bit about we've discussed offline that our plans for the next episode, and it's a little bit of a change up because we're not talking about like specific movies, but rather the state of Star Wars. Star Wars is such a huge thing now. There's, you know, uh, lots of different movies, more on the way with The Mandalorian and Grogu coming out in just a couple of weeks. And then there's others coming up. They're talking about doing a big anniversary re-release of the original theatrical versions of the original trilogy and not the special editions. Where for a long time the only way to watch the original versions was either to own the VHS or the Laserdisc from when they originally came out, or there's some fan recreations that were pulled from like old 35 millimeter prints with professional equipment. Like so, you can get them in pretty good quality, but it's certainly fan production stuff. It's not like you can't buy it legally because for the longest time Lucas wanted it that way. And so the idea that they're going to re-release those is interesting. And also there's a bunch of TV shows and there's theme park stuff. What's going on with Star Wars? That's the idea. So, um, anything to say about that, or we'll just save the discussion for next time?
So we're just like choosing our own adventure on a couple of movies to watch, or
I
we just gonna
figured
just
that like
yeah.
there's not necessarily any specific assignment other than just whatever you feel like. Because I'm someone who has basically in like I'm not going to claim to have read every Legends Star Wars tie-in novel because of course I haven't. There's a lot of stuff. There's too much stuff for anyone to have like read everything. But in terms of like movies and TV shows of everything that is currently canon in the Disney Star Wars era, I've basically seen all of that. My impression is that you've like seen the mainline movies, right?
Seen the mainline movies. I think I'd have to go back and check if I watched the way through the end.
I think to
Yes.
some extent, I would certainly not suggest that you should avoid watching anything. But I think part of what might be interesting as far as the discussion is when we're talking about like what is the state of Star Wars, it might be interesting to have the perspective of someone who's currently watching all of it and someone who's been interested but a little checked out on all of the other tie-in stuff.
So I will just a little caveat. I'm
Sure.
super checked in on Mandalorian.
Okay, yeah.
Boba Fett was always my favorite character, so I watched. I will probably rewatch like before going into the movie all the Mandalorian stuff. But you're right. The rest of the stuff,
Mm-hmm.
no idea.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about it. I think this is what I was going to say is like the topic is not any specific show or movie, but rather just what have we seen, what haven't we seen, what do we think about where Star Wars is going, where has it been, whatever feels like we're interested in talking about it.
Like it.
All right, so next time, the state of Star Wars. In the meantime, everyone, watch good movies.
Watch good movies.